Hey, welcome everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Ecosystem Aces. I'm Chip Rodgers, Chief Partner Officer at WorkSpan, and gosh, so excited to be joined today by Alina Everett. Alina, welcome.
Thank you so much, Chip. Thrilled to be here. Thank you. It's great.
Yeah. So it's fantastic to have you on. I had Gotham on. We chatted at reInvent, and just love the folks at Qualtrics doing amazing work. So, Alina is vice president of GSIs for focusing on EY and Deloitte for the GSI partners. So, a lot of great things that you're doing with EY and Deloitte, and just really excited to dive in. And Alina, you've had a long history in partnerships with now with Qualtrics for close to a year, I think, and a number of years at Microsoft and IBM, and then prior to that in consulting with Slalom.
Yes.
And so you come from an SI sort of perspective, so that makes a lot of sense because you lived it.
Absolutely.
And yeah, so let's jump in. Alina, maybe why don't you, if you could share a little bit about what you and your team are working on at Qualtrics.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and I'm just so lucky to be in this orbit. I got into the GSI world during my time at Microsoft and had a chance to work on that partnership with EY. And so that gave me a really good foundation for now what we're trying to build and really grow, cultivate at Qualtrics. We're really in that hyperscale mode. So I'm lucky enough to work with partners at, slightly different stages in our ecosystem. EY has been around, really kind of building a practice around XM, which is very rare at the GSI scale. And then, Deloitte is sort of newer in our ecosystem. We're building it up and, following the playbook, which has been really successful. So my team is focused on, GSI success, joint co-sell together, approaching our clients and meeting their needs from a tech standpoint around experience management. That's really Qualtrics' bread and butter. So you think about how an employee or a customer really sees a business and the people analytics around that. So making, easy insights surfaceable for the C-suite to be able to improve those businesses with that feedback. And of course, you need a really robust services layer around that. So business consultancies are really well positioned to do that, having all the history, the relationships with those businesses, and they're really well poised to kind of manage the change within those businesses and guide them in terms of what makes the most sense to implement, and then what to do once that technology is in place.
And there's so much change management that has to happen, right? I mean, you're really talking about, gosh, it's just it's experience, right? So it's pretty much everything. And how have you found the GSIs? You mentioned that it's unusual to have an XM practice. How have you found that that sort of transformation, even in the GSI space?
Yeah, no, I think it's becoming, from what I'm hearing from our partners, it's becoming increasingly a request of the customers that our GSIs work with. And for anyone who's not familiar with GSIs, global consultancy services providers. So I think, Deloitte, EY, Accenture, KPMG, those sorts of firms. So we've been hearing a lot from them. They spend a ton of time frontline with the customers, really understanding how their businesses are changing and evolving over time. And I would say, the tip of the spear right now around modernization, in addition to all the buzz we're hearing about AI, which actually feeds into this as well, but is really customizing the experience that employees and customers have. Retention, churn, those things are really expensive to maintain for a business, and they're really important metrics. Those are just a couple of the metrics that we think about when we look at people analytics. But I would say, building an XM practice in today's world is incredibly valuable and just, really helps a business keep a pulse on what will make sense for their customers and really get that loyalty. Because with today's competition, loyalty, customized experience is everything.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and I think Qualtrics, kind of created this category,
Yes.
really, right? And kind of came out of nowhere, but having just a real different perspective on how do you think of end-to-end customer experience. It sounds like as you're talking, you're also Qualtrics has extended it to employee experience as well.
Yes, yes. So employee experience is a really core part of our business. And, this is an area too where Deloitte has incredibly deep experience. They have a human capital design thing that we're really excited about partnering with and tapping into. That benchmarking, the insights that help CHROs really understand, what keeps employees happy, what they might be frustrated by and might not share in a classic forum like a survey. So if you
Mm.
know Qualtrics, you probably know it through the lens of a survey platform, but we do so much more than that. And there's a lot of unstructured data collection that we do now, and we can give a lot of those insights based on what people are saying in public forums, and surfacing that sentiment analysis to those leaders so they can make great employee decisions.
So I suppose that's where some of the AI comes
Yes.
in.
Absolutely. No, I've seen such cool things for our customers that we've built with, in tandem with these GSIs who are really great at taking our platform and really customizing it to the industry or the type of customer that we're working with. And sentiment analysis is one of my favorite things because you'll see a thread from I think we've all seen public forums where people are really getting into it and discussing
Mhm.
what's not working or what they are excited by, what they want to see more of, and to be able to have our AI, really seamlessly pick out what different words mean from an emotional perspective and what signals they could be indicating to a business. Our system does that incredibly well. So it's been really neat to see that in practice for some of these large, retailers and firms with frontline workers who experience a lot of that direct feedback and don't have a natural method to share that. And they might not be comfortable sharing it in a survey forum. So it's kind of cool to see it all seamlessly come together behind the scenes.
That's great. So it's because you're right. I think surveys are, you have the, what is it, the Hawthorne effect, I think, from, where the survey itself can impact or can affect and
Exactly.
influence the way that people respond. And so, it's interesting that Qualtrics is pulling data out of to this, sort of public forums to get that sentiment rather than just saying, asking and expecting people to give a clear, because sometimes you don't even know, right? It's, so
Exactly.
it's like you've got to pull it from anywhere. Yeah.
Yes, yes. And, we have a history too with market research and focus groups, things like that. And we're drawing on that experience and creating, a new platform where you can, do video analysis and the AI system will kind of, interpret the person's, sentiment and what they're saying in a more organic way too. Often, writing doesn't convey everything that we want to say, or people may be filtering, what their true intent is. And so it's really cool to be able to provide customers with a platform to have people record short videos, how they felt about a product, et cetera, and to be able to kind of just quickly surface those insights in what would have taken hours and hours of manual labor to kind of go through and comb and derive those insights from.
That's awesome. So, uh, we're all about partnering, and you mentioned, and we wanted to talk, Alina. One of the things that we wanted to dive into a little bit is how you're working with GSI partners to create joint solutions. So you just touched on that a little bit. Let's talk a little bit. How do you think about that? How does Qualtrics think about that? The solutions that you develop, and then but co-development, co-building with your SI partners.
Yeah, no, it's so important to think about co-innovation. And, I'm very excited. My team, the ecosystem team, is rolling into Brad Anderson, and he's the head of our engineering arm. And so co-build and co-innovation is critical to what we do. I think it can take so many forms, right? There's the classic offering that you can put out there in the market, that's a joint technology and services offer. So you can do, a sort of, packaged up tech piece, which would be, surveys or, that unstructured data we talked about, plus the consulting that surrounds that. So is there a change management process you need to go through, et cetera, or implementation, things like that. That's really kind of our bread and butter. How do we show up for a customer together? Then where it gets a little bit more complicated, but also really exciting, is where you can bring in another ISV as well. So,
Mm.
Independent software vendor, for those of you who are not in this field, really somebody who has additional IP that you can stack on top of your technology to make an even better, more customized solution. So I think about our partnership. We just announced an exciting partnership with Epic, and we are also doing amazing things with WorkJam. WorkJam is, a frontline technology, frontline worker technology, where people can, in retail settings or, at businesses, they can use it to do time planning. So what's your schedule for the month? They can collaborate on store feedback, things like that. And we can pull that data in from WorkJam and actually digest it in our Discover platform, surface those insights, and make them really easy to read for the C-suite. So that's an example of, two tech businesses coming together with the power of the GSIs, the services, to just create a really cool, unique experience tailored to that business. I always think about that commercial from the 90s, early 2000s, that was like, I'm a Mac, I'm a Windows. And it just makes me laugh, because I think, that is so typical of that time and how far we've come since. The story about corporate rivalries and, edging each other out for market share, that was really the surface, communication. And I think since then, you can see now in the robust partnership that Apple and Microsoft have together today, there are so many more opportunities to capture additional and more powerful customer space when you work together. So that's a really important part of our strategy.
Interesting. Yeah, I hadn't heard. Obviously, I know Epic, but hadn't heard of WorkJam. And as you describe it, I could see almost that it sounds like you're kind of in the similar space, but you're right. It's different enough that you're sort of differentiated, and you can complement each other and bring a more robust solution to the market. So
exactly, yeah, it's all about how can we do 1 + 1 = 3. And I think rather than traditional market capture and sort of fighting out, beating out the competition, the mindset for us partner managers really needs to become, what are our customers asking for? Listening to our partners who actually work with the customers on a day-to-day basis and hearing what they're asking for. And is there a flavor of that our technology doesn't capture yet? And is there a partner out there that already does that, so we don't have to reinvent the wheel? Another key point about this is, if a customer already has a technology like a WorkJam, being able to tap into that and say, hey, we can play nicely with the technologies you've already invested in. We don't have to change the entire system you're working with. That is a really powerful thing to share with your customer. It makes them feel understood. It helps save them money. It's a win-win for everybody.
Well, and yeah, I mean, great story. And I think it also it means that you have to have technology that's architected
Yes.
so that it can work together. I don't know if we're going to dive into a technical discussion here, but tell me a little bit about how Qualtrics thinks about that to be able to work with partners, other tech vendors like that.
Yeah, no, I think just from the outset, you start with the business use case, right? What are you trying to achieve together? Is that something ultimately that if you go and build that integration, will it serve both companies or all three companies? Of course, if you're working with a services provider, I would say I would caution against diving into building anything, and all my product manager friends will know this well. Caution against building anything until there's a market for it and that it will financially benefit all the players.
Mm-hmm.
So, we start with that business conversation. We understand what the mechanisms will be around the transaction. Like, how do we credit the different players? Is it a consumption-based model? Is it a monthly active user model? And so from there, once we have that case really ironed out, then we can make the case to the engineering leaders on our respective teams to invest resources that will actually sit together, build the architecture, diagram. They'll, sit together and figure out how the layers integrate. And with Qualtrics, it's pretty easy. There are we have a lot of built-in APIs, so we can pull from a lot of different data sources. So we think of WorkJam like we think of a Slack, right? Or, Facebook public groups where, you can just ingest those different data sources and put them all together. So we made it pretty simple.
Wow. All right. So this is really interesting, Alina, hearing you talk, because here you are focused on GSIs, and with the whole conversation is about integration and connecting and engineering teams together to build joint solutions.
Yeah.
I love that. I mean, it means what it means is that you're thinking about the business as a whole, right?
Yes. And that's so important. I think for any services partner manager, you want to be thinking about all of these things: the business use cases, the relationships, the marketing campaigns, the technology roadmap, right? But especially for these big GSIs. It's interesting coming from Microsoft, where we're these two big giants working together. We have armies of people who can feed resources into something. And now being at a smaller firm who's in hyperscale build mode, we really need to show up for the GSIs and kind of make a case, frankly, for why they should care about our firm, right?
Right.
And maybe that's sacrilege for me to say, but it's just honest. I think a lot of our partner managers listening to this are probably in the same boat, where you want the attention of the GSIs. They can help you scale massively, but they need a compelling reason to invest in a new technology or a new partner. And so I think having that broader view that includes co-innovation that will enable our GSIs to easily sell or bake in our technology and service their customers in the simplest way, that really makes the whole process a lot more seamless, and it makes a lot more financial sense for them as well to spend the dollars creating an XM practice as EY has done.
Yeah.
So we really try to make it worth their while.
Well, and you're right, because as an SI, you can't just spin something up, right? You have to make the investment. You have to hire the right people. You have to get them enabled. There's training programs. There's marketing dollars that they want to spend. They want to turn this into a real business. So it's an investment decision for them. So I love the way that you describe that, and you think about how you work with GSI partners to get them interested, right? And show them the value.
Exactly. No, it's definitely a two-way internal, sales pitch. And I think, again, a lot of our partner managers who listen to this are going to recognize this, but you really, at the end of the day, are an evangelist internally within your business. And you really have to care about what your sales team cares about, how they're going to make money, but tell that story about how partners can be so helpful to them. And then on the flip side of that, you've got to spend a lot of time listening to your GSI or SI partners, and understanding, how they go to market, how they make money, how we can show up and be an additive partner versus an added complexity for the client they're trying to serve. So it's, definitely a job that requires, EQ, listening, and sometimes marriage counseling.
Yeah. Well, so this is fascinating. I love, we're just kind of going into a lot of different areas. One of the things that we did want to talk about, and you mentioned Epic earlier. I'd love to, Alina, if you could share some of how you are working with SI partners on some very specific industry solutions. So Epic is, huge, obviously, in healthcare. How do you think about that, and taking Qualtrics into those very industry specific, solution areas?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is where I think GSIs really, those global consultancies really are differentiated from smaller services partners. They in many cases are organized around industries. So there's a whole healthcare engine or a whole financial services engine that these businesses have set up with tens of thousands of consultants who spend all of their time with banks or hospitals or insurance providers, and retailers. I mean, the list goes on, right? But I think it is so valuable, especially for a firm of our size, to be able to tap into that knowledge, that historical perspective, and that tailored vision of what that industry will need. A consultancy is going to bring best practices, subject matter experts, benchmarks in many cases. And those are all things that we can layer into our technology. They can, use our technology to kind of inform their vision. And so really, I see us as a supporting role for that industry case. EY announced EY Nexus, which is essentially an industry vertical stack of services and technologies. And, we're hoping to be a key part of that story that really speaks to, here's a set of solutions that will help you modernize your business in X industry. So I just think the industry lens is really, really important in the GSI partnership space, and to defer and lean on your GSI partners because they know it best. They've been in it, and they know how to tweak things so that their customers are really happy.
Really interesting. And I think Qualtrics is the kind of technology that really can apply in almost literally any industry, I would think.
Yeah,
right?
I think so. Yep. And we've got an incredible amount of support around our core industries. So, we have a lot of focus on financial services, health and life sciences, and public sector. And I know that will only expand from there from an industry lens perspective, but that's also where it's exciting to be able to lean on the EYs and the Deloittes of the world, because, they have retail practices and tech, media, and telecom practices and oil and gas, energy. There's so many different industries that, a hyperscaling firm may not have tapped into yet, or may not have organized around yet. And so it really helps us, I think, to think about the long-term roadmap and where there is additional exciting potential. You think about oil and gas and you say, well, who's the customer for that other than the gas pump moment? But, employee experience is incredibly important at those firms. And so there are really cool use cases that the GSIs have helped bring to the forefront. Yeah. Interesting.
Alina, another topic that we wanted to talk about, and we've talked about sort of, building joint solutions and working with your, partners to bring these solutions to market. Marketplaces are so important these days. Let's talk a little bit about that. When we were preparing, you had some really interesting thoughts around, sort of taking those offerings, creating packaged offerings, and then selling them in marketplaces. So let's dive in a little bit on that aspect of, working with partners and going to market together.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and I've seen different flavors of this. I started my partner journey in the SMB space, small, mid-sized business, with, managed services providers, cloud businesses. So I have seen the fully transacting version of the marketplace. And, when a smaller or mid-sized business can put their offering directly on a company's marketplace and can, buyers can come in and click sell, click buy. That's a game changer in terms of scaling for those companies. And then on the flip side of that, the GSIs, it totally depends on the GSI's model. A lot of, the firms that I work with are advisory firms. So they do audit, they have, restrictions based on their compliance requirements. And so they can't necessarily do that transacting immediately in a public marketplace. But what's really valuable is packaging up a joint offering and saying, hey, if you're this kind of client looking for this sort of solution around healthcare, you can see what we can offer in this easily listed, or this, easy to digest listing. And that becomes a great tool for educating your own sellers on each side. Like, what can we do with EY? What can we do with Deloitte? And so it's a really great evangelism tool, and it really equips your sellers with just a nice like 1-page breakdown of what you're offering in the market together. And I like, at Microsoft, we had several different offerings that we were constantly cultivating. And again, working with the engineering team to constantly sort of build and grow that co-build pipeline. Another great thing about a marketplace is it gives you back-end data about what's popular. What are customers excited by? What are they clicking on? What are they not clicking on? And that helps inform your tech roadmap too. So I think it's as useful an internal tool as it is an external business generator.
Yeah. Interesting. I hadn't thought of that as well, but an internal tool, both for both partners, right? Sort of digesting, like, all right, here are our offerings.
Exactly.
The other thing is, I think today with private offers,
Yep.
it's not necessarily that somebody's buying a one size fits all, at a certain price, but as you're working with your customer, you can tailor the pricing and the all the terms and everything, into that private offer.
Exactly. And, I think a lot of people think, gosh, marketplace, I have to have a fixed price, or I have to say, if you consume X, this is what it'll cost you. And a lot of a lot of customers are looking for that level of transparency. And I think that is easier to do when you have an actually, transactable listing on a marketplace. But when you think about, the bigger transformations and using these listings as more of a conversation starter than anything,
Mm,
where you can kind of, list out those variables. Here are the kinds of problems we help solve. Here's what we've addressed using this, joint packaged solution of services and technology. Here are some of the things we want to think about together if we start a conversation. So it doesn't have to be, a completely baked out, listing. It can just be a conversation starter. And
yeah.
I valuable for everyone to have that.
Yeah, including, like, case stories and things like that. You
Yes,
can
exactly.
even yeah.
Yeah, and certifications, like what is your partner, bringing to the table? If they have 40 or 50 consultants, which, we're lucky that these GSIs have a bunch of folks who are trained up on our technology and, can deliver that. It's really nice to be able to see that, in a forum like a listing where, okay, if I go with Qualtrics and Deloitte or Qualtrics and EY, I know I'm getting the A team, they're trained on this technology. They
Mhm.
can inform me, what I need and have my best interests in mind.
Yeah, awesome. Alina, this has been fascinating, just a great conversation. Maybe before we close, I'd love to hear, and you've already shared a lot of, sort of best practices and advice for other partner leaders, but if you have any additional thoughts for, or for our audience on some things that have helped you be successful over the years, and that you think about as a leader of partner managers.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, I learn from this audience all the time. So, you probably have more to learn than to share here. But I would just say that, I lead with listening, empathizing, putting myself in the shoes of that partner, and then advocating for them. That's where I've found the most success. If you're approaching your internal teams and asking for their time, say the sellers, are really focused on consumption or monthly active users, right? Technology sellers care about spinning that wheel so that the money comes in. Helping them understand from their perspective why it would be beneficial to partner with an SI and saying, it won't necessarily slow you down. Let's do some phased work that will really work for the customer and give them a taste of this without having to commit to everything all up front. That's where there can be really great mutual wins. And I think wherever you can find solutions and frame them from the perspective of empathizing with whatever is, driving that person's bottom line, that's where you're going to have the most success.
Great advice. Because it's a hard thing to do. But it's really because you are, and like you said, you have to advocate for the partner internally, because sometimes it takes a while for people. Like, sometimes it's not immediately obvious, and over time, as your own teams get experience with a partner, then they'll sort of naturally gravitate.
Yeah,
But it's getting that flywheel started is
exactly.
is
Getting
really
those
important.
getting those wins under the belt, even if you have to take a phased approach or do a POC, proof of concept, together.
Awesome.
Yes.
Alina, thank you so much. Gosh, really appreciate all that you've shared this morning, and I loved having you on the podcast. I really appreciate you joining.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, fantastic. So with that, I think we'll say thank you all for joining, and to another episode of Ecosystem Aces, and we will see you on the next episode. Thanks, everybody, and thanks, Alina.
Thank you.